Welcome to the Only One Mic podcast. Carl Gerard, Brooklyn Dre, just me. We got a special guest today. President of the INVIA Foundation, host of the Misconnected Podcast, and author of There Was Violence. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, everybody. My name's Imani Kaliid. I am a LA native, career digital production professional, recently author, as you said, president of the INVIA Foundation, a foundation serving victims of violence with technological tools and services, and host of the Misconnected Podcast. You know what's trippy?
What's that?
Before I started my podcast, I was thinking about cool names. I saw y'all name in the Apple iTunes Direct. I'm like, damn, that's a cool name. I wanted that.
See? Look at that. Beat you to the punch.
He did, man. I was living in Europe at the time, and I was just looking around. I was like, oh, I like this name. And then I was like, oh, they got me.
How long were you in Europe for?
I was there for a year.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I miss it.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the aspects that you miss?
Man, you know what's trip is that before I went, because I went for grad school, and, you know, it's like some people are like, where are you going? It's like, oh, I'm going to Spain. And they're like, oh, one of my friends is like, you know, she's like Huey Newton conspiracy theorist. And she's like, oh, they don't like black people in Spain. I was like, you ain't never been. How you know? It's like, I'm sure there's some races there, but you ain't never been. So I went, and, you know, just being over there is like being in North America. It's like you can hop around to different states. And there you can hop around to different countries. So the experience was cool because it gives you perspective on how you get treated when you are African American in this country. Like, for example, I went to Switzerland and I was lost. I was looking for, you know, this one of the tourist spots. You know, a white woman grabbed my hand, said, oh, I'll take you. I'm like, oh, they setting me up.
Wow.
Like, but, you know, but a stranger, I'm like, oh, they got me. But it was just like, they were just cool like that. And I had surgery over there, and I forgot my prescription on my phone. The lady was like, oh, just bring it tomorrow. I'm like, that would never
happen here.
You know, with the skepticism and the way we're treated sometimes, you know, just the food is cheaper and everything. So it's just a lot. It just really reframes what you think you know about the world and what you think you know about people. So I miss it a lot, man. If it wasn't for the pandemic, I would be visiting and taking another trip.
Yeah, and a lot of people tell you a lot about the world sitting on a stoop and porch, right?
Of course.
There's racism everywhere. You don't have to look far for that, right?
Nah, not at all, man. Nah.
All right. Yeah. So listen, I'm going to jump right into it with you. You know, I got a lot I can talk to you about. And, you know,
I got a lot to tell you.
I know you do. So listen, South Central Los Angeles, and this is how, you know, you grew up during the 70s and the 80s. Which was totally the crack era, whether you was East Coast or West Coast. You know, as Tracy Morgan once said, either you was smoking it, selling it, somewhere you was caught up in it. Had family members or something like that.
Or so, you a product of it.
Or a product of it, yeah. We all see how it affected our communities, how it affected our families. How did it affect you to write this book, There Was Violence? Because there's a lot right there in that title, just from doing my research on you and all. I know the story. We know the story. We want to hear the story from you. I don't want to tell your story. So jump right into it. Tell us about South Central Los Angeles, crack era. Go.
Right. Okay, cool. That's a good setup.
Let's get set up.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, dude, I never set out to be no author. Like I had other ambitions and other talents and whatnot. And just to frame it for people, what it was like in South Central LA during that time. So it's like, when I came along, it's like, we're coming right out of the Vietnam War and out of the Civil Rights era. And then, you know, like in the early to mid 70s, you had the Crips and the Bloods that are just kind of really forming and gaining traction, because what was happening out here is LAPD was shipping in racist cops from the South to handle us. You know, when I say handle, it just means to be brutal against people of color. So, like moving towards like to the late 70s, gang activity started gaining like a lot of traction. You see membership from both Crips and Bloods really gaining traction. And then even the drugs that was around then were like, what was it, like Sherm and PCP and all that. With that comes, a different layer of violence, and it comes a different layer of crime and different levels of hardship. And so the way I describe it in the book, man, it's kind of like a Black version of Game of Thrones, right? Because everybody got their different set, their different location, they got their different motto and logo, their different colors and whatnot. So it's really in your best interest to know where you are at all times. You can put a map of LA County up and you give me about 100 different thumbtacks and I can show you where different gangs are. So it's like an emotional minefield because you never, when something will come up, you never knew when you're going to step on a different mind that's going to blow up in your face. You never knew if violence will come to your doorstep. You never really knew when, somebody would get shot, somebody would die, when the police were rolling or whatever. So, with, just moving into like the mid 80s, man, you have this explosion of wealth with people. You got people who was riding the bus one day, now they're driving a brand new late model car the next day. But then, you got different predators. It's like, okay, there's different opportunities. You got guys snatching chains. You got people carjacking other guys with their pimped out cars in the drive-through. So there was just like a lot of growing activity, and that level of violence was evolving like on a daily basis. And so it's just, for a guy like me, I was, like I am now, I'm clean cut, but I'm hip to the game. Like I know the streets, and for me, it was an experience, a growing experience of learning the politics in the streets, learning the politics in the house, because home was crazy sometimes. And it became a matter of, what do I need to do as a quote unquote good kid? What do I need to do to not get killed? And that for Black people, like that's a heavy burden on top of the racism to carry, because we're always at level 8 or 9 out of a 10. There's this constant, and I'll have to tell you guys, there's this constant state of being on high alert, being in this stage of threat assessment, if that's making sense. So it was, and that's what I'm capturing in the book, because like it's just a lot of different unexpected adventures and moments that are life-threatening and life-changing for you. And it's just, it's just really burdensome. And it's happening at a time where you got young people, they're supposed to be developing as young men and women. They're not supposed to be burdened with murder and assault and violence and domestic abuse and all that. So it was just really an introduction to violence from an early age, like 7 years old, when the first bullet flew by my head. And it was just overwhelming, man. And I made it out just really with intentions of being, being deliberate about staying out of trouble, but also I was just lucky.
So you never got pressured to join a gang?
Nah, that wasn't me. Like that was an option. Well, first of all, my mother wasn't having it. Like, my mother was gangster. My mother was a pistol packing woman. She wasn't having that. And I honestly, I didn't want that for myself. Like, I didn't carry it like that. I was known as one of those guys that were like, let's leave him alone. He's playing ball. His family's cool. But there was no real pressure, because I'm not made like that. Now I can scrap, I can fight
as you would need to,
yeah. I carried a shotgun to school some days and nobody knew. I carried a big hunting knife to school. But in terms of being a gangster, it's like, I knew that wasn't me. It's like, that's not me. And people knew that wasn't me, but they didn't know that I had hands, It's just, right. and I still like it like that. I don't want nobody to see me coming if it comes down to that. Like, I don't want that trouble, I mean, I'm sure you guys know from back in New York or wherever, it's like, there's different characters, and you can look somebody in 3 seconds, you can pretty much size them up. But like being a gangster, that wasn't in the cards for me.
Now, you also talked about threat assessment, right? Mm-hmm. And I know you did an interview, and in the interview, you mentioned that, maintaining a growing sense of threat assessment. And with age, you eventually learned that part of the inner city survival was not only about learning the street politics, but figuring out what your high card was. Your high card was what?
My high card was basketball, man. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, I was athletic, but I sucked at first. And I had an older brother who played basketball, and he used to like destroy me. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll play baseball. But then I grew pretty quick, and there was, I think, from the period when up until the age of 13, I didn't know what life was holding for me. I was like, okay, I'm just going to try not to get killed, right, because it was happening around me. Right. And, but when I turned 14, like my athleticism started to develop, and I started to hone it a little bit. And then I started dominating, and then, colleges started showing interest, and it's like, oh, this is something, this is something that I can cling on to. This is something I can occupy myself for 2.5, 3 hours a day and get some form of therapy to get away from the craziness. So yeah, basketball was definitely a high card, man, and get the opportunity to travel a little bit, get positive attention, keep my body in shape. And yeah, and probably the biggest thing is getting the positive attention, because up until then I was just considered kind of like a nerd, I was built like Kevin Durant, but shorter. Yeah.
What college did you attend?
I went to Long Beach State.
So you stayed in your state?
Yeah. I stayed local.
And then you studied abroad?
I didn't study abroad till like a few years ago, like about six years ago.
Oh.
So I did that later in life. Yeah.
Okay. I think college is a big difference when you go straight out of high school, and then when you go later on. Like when I didn't go straight out of high school. I moved to North Carolina and I went to hair school. I went to Dudley's hair school, and I came back and my father was like, you're going to have to join the service, or you're going to have to go to school, but you're going to get up out of here. My dad would have been 80 this year, so he was old school. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I ended up looking at historically black colleges, and I wanted to go someplace that wasn't too far from home. So I ended up going to Del State. I think I did it because like I had to, or that was the thing to do when you got out of high school, was to continue your education. And I didn't appreciate college until just recently when I enrolled, and I wasn't rushed to pick a major. I picked the major that I wanted, and before it just felt like it's something like I had to do it. So I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the parties and I enjoyed the people. But as far as being in school, it is a big difference. So what did you find any differences? Did you appreciate it more when you went back?
Yeah, because doing undergraduate studies, I didn't know I had no idea what I wanted to study. I just saw college as a means to just be off the streets and to bring some kind of order and structure to my life, and just be on some kind of path that would take me away from what was happening to some of my friends. And they were like, becoming teenage parents, or just getting locked up, or just, out there slanging and or just doing nothing. It's like, I didn't want that. So I just chose just a basic major, but doing it later in life and having more life experience, it was a matter of, okay, I've lived a bit or a lot. I'm more focused. So now I have enough life experience to really hone in on something or some studies that's going to serve me. And what I studied was business competitiveness and innovation. And it's like, just going in with greater intentions. Like I was more excited about that. I absorbed a lot of the content better versus, just really, quite frankly, making a fear-based and naive decision when I was doing my undergrad, which I think a lot of young people do. It's like, you don't know shit. And you just kind of like do stuff and you're spending money, you're incurring student loan debt or whatever. But like this one was a very different experience. And plus I had more money to enjoy, myself more so just like kind of being in Europe. It's like, okay, well, I can go to Portugal for a few days, or I can just take a train. So I live 20 minutes from the French border. It's like I can take a train to France and just kind of hang out for a day or two. So it was like a much better experience. I mean, I wish I would have did it when I was younger, but hey, man, what's done is done.
Right. Well, that sounds beautiful. I think I went out of the country one time and I can't even remember it was Canada. So that doesn't even count. I think I was five. It doesn't even count. But, you know, and I would be ashamed of myself because I need my passport. I don't even have that. But, you know, I really want to get on that and start to travel. And I really did you go to France to visit?
I've been to France like 10 times. I mean, I went before I went to grad school, but like living 20 minutes from the border, you just hop on a train for like $30 and you're there.
It's so funny that you said that your friend told you that they were really racist in Spain, because I was speaking to a friend of mine and I'm like, I always wanted to go to France. Like, I just want to go to like a little bistro. I see myself chilling in France. And my friend was like, don't go there because they are so racist. And I'm like, you just really got to go and experience it yourself.
My experience is that if you go there, if you go in any country and you don't go and be an they'll be okay with, you know. But if you go and you the ugly American and you just like, you know, you like, why they ain't got no Roscoe's chicken, or like, you know, like where Fatburger at? Yeah, where Carl's Jr. at? Then they're gonna look at you crazy. You just can't. I mean, there's racism everywhere, but you know, it's just funny how, and I think in a different way, that's trauma speaking. It's like, oh, you can't go there. That's fear-based thinking.
Right.
And that's part of why I do what I do, is to help people connect the dots. It's like, everything is not the way TV is portrayed, and everything is not the way that you think it is, or if you're drawing a false equivalence of what's happening here and you go to a different country, then you might experience something different. It just, as Black people, we got to get out of, you know, this mindset that everybody is out to get us and everybody hates us. And that's not really the case in my experience.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up, is that do we set ourselves based on trauma and our mindsets to say, I won't go to X, Y, Z. Like, no matter where we go as Black people, the radar is always up to say, if I go here, I'm going to be mistreated. If I go, you got some people that'll tell you, if you're American Black going to Africa, you know that you'll be mistreated by your own people. I've heard that argument made a lot of times. So it's like, because of the way that we're treated here in the States, you know, we kind of create our own mental trauma of traveling abroad, or just sometimes even leaving your own neighborhood. You know? It's
true. I was getting ready to say that. It's people that, you know, there's people that live in I won't even use New York. I'll use Delaware for an example. Okay. It's a smaller state. The first state is people that live in Wilmington that's never been to Dover, and people that live in Dover that don't go to Wilmington because of what they heard, and they're already traumatized and don't want to travel like that. So, I mean, that happens here. I live right next to the Bronx. It's people that live in this area and they would be like, oh, I'm not going to the Bronx. You know what I mean? Well, now I wouldn't go like that either.
Yeah, right now. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Not right now. But, you know, back in the day, I used to hop on the train all the time. We was on Fordham Road in like 6 minutes. We was there. Like, you know, so it's people that's scared. They're scared because of what they're taught. A lot of that goes, and a lot of that has to do with the media, I feel. Because I remember, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Michael Moore did a documentary, Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah.
And in the documentary, he's like, you know, a black male with a hoodie that's like a scary figure. So it makes people lock their doors because you're constantly looking on TV, and a black male with a hoodie on is a scary person. They're portrayed as a scary person, a dangerous person on TV. So people lock their doors. You know, it gets to the point where even Black people lock their doors because they're like, here come a black man with a hoodie, but it's what they're throwing at us. So I just wanted to ask you real quick to jump into your book a little bit, because I just published a book too. So I'm interested in the book.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations to you too. Thank you. So your book, when was it published? When did you publish it?
I just released it in September, this past September. Okay.
So what inspired you to write this book outside of just wanting to tell your story of growing up and your experiences? What else inspired you?
So it's funny how it all came together. I used to live in a beach community called Marina del Rey, which is near Venice Beach. Have you ever heard of Venice Beach?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the story is that I just had Sunday breakfast at one of my favorite restaurants. And I was like, okay, it's time to go to the grocery store. And I'm walking out of the parking lot and I see this dude coming towards me and his fist balled up. He got this intense look on his face and he's probably maybe 60 feet away or so. And we talk about trauma and I'm like, to me, my brain is going, this looks like every time where you piss somebody off and they want to do harm to you. They're going to take off on you. So now my mind with each microsecond is going, okay, get ready. Like, I don't know what dude's problem is, but keep that chin tucked, get your feet ready, and he's a bigger dude. Like I'm 6'4", I go about 220, 225. This is a bigger dude, a younger dude. And he gets about 10, 15 feet away and I'm thinking like, okay, here it goes. We're both in arm's distance. And then he passes me and I'm still keeping my eye on him like, yeah, nice try. I know that trick. But then he's passing me. And the reason why I reacted to that again is because that's what I've experienced in my past, or I've seen that develop, like that conflict develop right in front of me. And this goes back to that trauma. And then, so he passes and dude was just looking for his lady friend. Like I look back and he's like embracing some woman and, his lady friend, they're hugging and kissing. And then on the real, I was just like, what the you? Like,
right.
You got to have a talk with yourself. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I knew it happened to me as a younger man and up into my early 20s. And it's like, what is wrong with you? And I went to the grocery store and I sat in the car for a good half hour, just pouring over everything. And it was just like, this requires like some serious introspection. And I'm like sleepwalking in the grocery store, just still thinking about that. And I'm putting groceries in the cart and I'm pouring everything. And I'm thinking like, I work in corporate America. I can't go to work with a black eye or missing teeth or just be out of work for long periods of unexplained time. And I went home and, I journaled because I journaled pretty regularly. I journaled. And 3 months later, I had a 90,000 word document. And common thread of all that, there was violence. There was violence that impacted me. And you talk about crack. My brother used crack. This is the first time I've ever said those words to another person. Y'all hearing it for the first time.
Wow.
My brother periodically crack. Mm-hmm. And I have other family member who disassociated from their Afrocentricity. My mother was traumatized with violence and my other sister was traumatized through violence. And so it was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And I gotta share this because at that point, it wasn't just about me. It was more about what are the other implications? It's like, I used to put people in the box like, oh, she's just a hood rat. She just don't want nothing for herself. She's bad. Or this dude, he's just a punk, or this dude, he's just a thug or whatever. It's deeper than that for people, especially us. There's like nobody grows up wanting to be quote unquote bad or a criminal. Like there's a reason for all of that. And that exercise with the book, one of the bullet points is I walked away with a lot of empathy. Cause I used to, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Soldier Story with Denzel Washington.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Remember how the sergeant used to hate CJ?
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to hate anybody that disrupted the peace in the neighborhood or the house to that level. She just like really hated because I was a kid that wanted peace. I wanted to do kid to be goofy and watch cartoons and stuff. But this was a learning experience for me because a lot of empathy came with that. It's like my mother didn't want to be a heavy-handed woman. She was a woman who grew up in the South who was forced to marry a guy that raped her. She was, I know that hit with you. Like she was, there was an attempted kidnap and she jumped from a pickup truck into a gravel road. She was, black people were terrorized. And, my mother was on anxiety medication. I didn't know what that means. And, and that's a lot of people's story in the hood, man. It's like, if we're so hobbled through racism, and there's, economic, there's inequity financially. There's so much weighing against us. And it's like, what people are going to do? Well, they're going to turn to what's available. And sometimes that's crime. If you shut off access to education and peace and prosperity, people they're going to find their way somehow, whether it's good or bad. And so the other part of this is, with me, like, I thought I was doing pretty good, and I'm pretty adjusted at that time. We're talking 2016, and I felt a weight off my shoulders. And what that looks like for me is coming to terms with what happened to me. I come to terms with seeing my parents fist fight. I came to terms with seeing my mother pull a gun on my brother, trying to get him off drugs. I came to terms with dudes that wanted to shoot me for bumping into him on a bus. And I went from a space where I resented people, and I just really compartmentalized a lot and just shoved emotions and resent and shoved all these emotions down to a stage of just peace and relaxed, and to the point where I can sit with my own thoughts. I don't need the TV or the radio playing in the background because I'm comfortable with what comes up. In fact, I haven't owned a TV since 2017. Yeah. I still don't have one. And so what that also does is come to terms with the violent trauma and using the proper language. Like, I was traumatized. And it doesn't feel good saying, but I was traumatized, and other people are traumatized. And so where that comes to is, it puts me in a place where now it's freeing up bandwidth in my head and freeing up bandwidth emotionally to do other things, to venture out, to follow other curiosities, and to just be in the habit of getting in a phone booth with unpleasant thoughts, slugging it out. And then I'm the only one walking out. The trauma's back in the phone booth. I'm cool. I mean, I got a few bruises from that exercise. And so what I really want, man, is, especially for our people, I want our people to experience the other side of the trauma, and the other side is peace. The other side is having a clear vision of what your purpose is or what's for you, greater self-awareness. That there's so much, and I'm really downplaying the positive effects. And for me, it was like, I want as many people on this planet, whether they're in Ukraine, whether they're in the Darfur region in Africa, whether they're in Cabrini Green, maybe the Marcy projects, wherever. I want people to experience that process of trauma to peace, and just understanding that it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not fun. But I say it like this. I had knee surgery a few years when I was in Spain. The physical therapy was but it was necessary. So I say, don't confuse discomfort and pain with being on the wrong path or being undergoing the wrong course of action. Healing is uncomfortable by nature. It's painful, but it's necessary. So my mission is, part of my mission is to share that with as many people who will listen and or read the book.
So talk a little bit about the healing process. Like, what was it for you?
So the way, and I think it'll look a lot different for a lot of other people because there's so many different variables and so many different experiences and so many different sensibilities have. For me, it was, I'm the guy that I got to put pen to paper. It's like, let me start with my earliest memory. What's my earliest memory? When my mother was going to beat the shit out of my sisters and I happened to be in the middle. And I just worked back from my earliest memory, and I looked at each significant moment up until I was about 18 years old, and understanding and deconstructing what each moment was, or what those significant moments were. For example, I talked to you about the guy on the bus that wanted to shoot me. It's like I bumped into him, and he told another guy, he's like, I was going to shoot. I had a Chrome 38. I was going to shoot him. For years, I used to be like, I hope I run into him. Because he was an older kid. I was in the 9th grade. He was like a junior or a senior. He went to a school called Crenshaw. And he told a guy named Mark, he said, yo, he's going to shoot you when y'all got the bus to scrap. Because he threatened me. He was like, we could take it off the bus. I'm like, bet, let's do it. I used to, guys, we fantasize about people up, it's like.
Oh, of course. Even after a fight, you think about everything. I should have went here. I should have went there. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
and so it was like, I kind of hope in my unevolved caveman way, I hope I run into that dude and be like, what's up now?
Right.
And I carried that for years. But with that moment, as an example, I asked myself, what was his home life like? For a dude that want to shoot you because you accidentally bumped into him, he can't be coming from a home of love. He can't be coming from a place where people have tools, emotional tools to work stuff out and be happy and be good to one another. And it's like, I gotta release that 16 or 17-year-old. I gotta relieve him of that burden of a guy that was going to potentially shoot me, because it's good for him in a way, but it's better for me to have less baggage going forward as an adult. And I did that with what I'm going to call a transformative experience. I forgave my mother for some of the crazy she did, like throw a pot of hot boiling water on my daddy during dinner. I forgave, what are some of the other moments? Like some of the fights I had when I got busted in school in the Valley. Like I went to a school with, I was a classmate of Ice Cube.
Oh.
And, like what happened on the bus or at school there. And so it was just really combing through these moments, understanding what happened, understanding my role in it, because like it or not, you have a role in it, whether it's you just being in a specific place, whether it's you say something that pulls you into conflict or whatever. And, it's like, I don't want to discount that and let myself off the hook. It's not an excuse for somebody attacking you, but I'm a big advocate. And this is a quote that I use from the HBO show, The Wire. It's like, all the pieces matter. Mm-hmm. And if you can see all the stars in the constellation of your life, of your past, of your trauma, then you can connect the dots and really develop or enhance your understanding of what has happened to you or what is happening to you. And so that's what I'm modeling for people in the book. I'm going through everything. I'm going through all these uncomfortable moments in retrospect, understanding what happened, and then looking at the before and after, before that particular event and after event, like how did that change me? And I'm just really modeling for people of something that I think in the layman's point of view, that's effective of deconstructing your trauma.
Now, how important do you believe that is to catch the youth right now? Because as you can see, I'm pretty sure in California, just like it is in New York and Chicago, the level of violence, since, if you want to say coming out of the pandemic, I know what's going on way before the pandemic, but coming out of it, it seems like it's getting a lot more crazier, a lot more scary, a lot more wild.
Yeah.
And, it's a lot of it is being committed by young people. Like you have cases of young people beating elders, killing babies, raping, murdering. So is it maybe something that they're not confronting, that they're kind of projecting onto the rest of the world, but it's coming in like a mass wave? So do you feel that it's important, which I'm pretty sure you do? Pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but I got to ask you anyway. Do you think that it's important to kind of stop this now, like have these young people face the trauma that they've been through before they get out there?
Absolutely, because you talk about the youth. I've been mentoring a young man for over 10 years, and over the holidays, just after the holidays, he got robbed. He went to a jewelry store and somebody robbed him at gunpoint. But back to your question, like the importance of that is that I feel like people are sleepwalking, and they don't understand really what is happening in real time. What's happening in real time with their own emotions, what's happening in their communities, their neighborhoods, the state, the country. And part of the healing process and the resolution is awareness. Like I really wish that somebody was using the proper language when I was coming up. Like the proper language to use is you're traumatized. You're negatively impacted. You are a victim of this. It's not to say you a punk. It's not to say that as a young person that you did something wrong. It's not to say that you're soft. Like two things can happen at once. You can still be a masculine, hard man and be a victim. Right. The game is the game. So we have to, I think, bring people, especially young people, to a level of awareness and understanding of what's happening and how to navigate around and through that. And I just don't feel like that's happening enough. I mean, especially with some of our political leaders, like you got some of these people who are, like I feel like I relate a lot to Anthony Fauci in the sense of like I've been there, done that. Like he's been there, done that with the AIDS epidemic and SARS and all that. It's like I've been around a lot of violence, man. And it's like I can tell you that is more about just that particular moment where somebody's beaten or raped or assaulted. If something happens to you, it's going to ripple. The ripple effect is going to impact the people who are close to you, the people who you are associated with your jobs or whatever. Because another positive of this experience with me is that I didn't understand that the violent trauma was spilling into other parts of my life, romantically, at work, and even socially with some of my friends. I just assumed that I already dealt with it, and that wasn't the case. So it's just a really big matter of awareness, education, and then hearing from people who've actually been through that to lend some credibility and make younger people understand, like, yo, like it's in your best interest, guy or girl or whomever, to tackle this right now, because if you don't, then your chances of happiness, getting the best partner you can, getting the best career you can, is going to be a lot more difficult than what it needs to be.
And I know you talked about mentorship, which, is like very hard these days to get the right people to mentor.
I'm a mentor.
Well, all right. Well, Pleasant Company excluded. But like one thing that always kind of got me was, you have a lot of people who have, I guess if you want to call it influence, right? Which we don't have to look towards those people to say, come in here and teach our kids, because some of them have jacked up lives as well. But if you had to offer something to the community that say, buy your record, see your movies, things like that, nobody comes back to actually talks to these kids to say, well, this is what's going on. Like, for instance, and there's no shot at Barack Obama or anything like that, but listen, all the violence that happens in Chicago, and a person of his stature, his influence, would come back to that community. You get what I'm saying? And say, listen, this is what we need to do. This is how, try to talk to these kids and talk to the people of the community, try to get this thing settled. Who would make like the best mentors? Like, I know you saying because you went through your traumatic experience, you can actually talk to people on that level. But like, how do we get those people to come to these communities, to come to these schools, to do the things that need to be done to stop what's happening right now? What do you think?
Man, I love that question. And as confident as I can be and as great as I think I am, I'm not the magic bullet. I think it takes a level of ambassadorship, like different. And, the more I talk about it, maybe that's something I'm going to work into my whole mission. We need ambassadors to go out to schools and sporting events and universities. Like, that's one of the things I want to do when it's safer, is just to go out and have speaking engagements. We need ambassadors to speak on it. We need people, women, LGBTQ, whomever, who have experienced this type of violence in their life, is to go out and talk about it and engage young people and let young people tell us what they're going through, as opposed to, you got to do this and you got to that. It's like doing what we're doing, just having a conversation. Like, the way things are now with violence is a lot different from when I was coming up. Like, I'm really removed from the day-to-day struggles and the day-to-day dangers that young people are going through. But I think there's a meeting place, or a meeting place where we can have a dialogue about that. So I think the ambassadorship is number one. And number two, man, it has to be prioritized. I don't know where President Obama's priorities are. Like, I see him doing stuff on Netflix, and I'm not banging on him or nothing like that, but I like the idea of him going to Cabrini Green or someplace, well, maybe not Cabrini, but like going to Chicago where the violence is just intense from my understanding, and talk about that stuff. It's like, imagine how life-changing that would be to hear President Obama acknowledge you, you know, or just be willing to hear you. Like that will, man, I mean, I venture to say that kind of thing could add days to your life. Just hearing somebody of that caliber really sympathize with you. So I just think, you know, it needs to be prioritized over other things. And we just need to get people out and just really engage young people. And the thing that kills me is when we leave kids in the dark. We leave young people in the dark. We leave single mothers or single Black fathers in the dark, man. And it just, people just need to know and feel that they matter. And if we can do that on a consistent basis, it makes a world of a difference.
Right. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I just know that this is a different breed out here. You know, I remember like growing up. Yeah. No, I'm not saying I was the perfect kid, but I remember growing up, you know what I mean? It was a certain level of respect. Now we might have been going to the gas station and buying 40s thinking we was going to get drunk at an early age when we were underage. And we might have been smoking cigarettes behind our parents' back or rolling up a joint, you know, but as soon as you saw your mother's friend coming, it's like, oh, how you doing? You know, these kids today, they will sit there, roll it, smoke it, curse.
Offer you a hit.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Curse and carry on. So I feel like at some point, you know, having like what you said, an ambassador going out and talking, or, you know, I think that would reach 1, 2, and that's good because that's a start. That's a start. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm saying it's not going to reach the masses. These kids are out of control here, there, everywhere. You know, I made a joke earlier, but the Bronx is nuts right now.
Very much.
It's not no place you want to just be walking around. There's little babies dying because of stray bullets and everything. Is, you know, before we even logged on, I was watching the news. 13-year-old just got arrested for trying to mug a 76-year-old lady in the Bronx. Like, this is real. Like, I don't know if COVID made people crazy, but it seemed like once people got out the house, they were like, you know, and they're just doing whatever. And it's like, where are your senses? Like, what's going on?
I think it really, you hit on a couple of things. Like, I think it really is like I've said all along, COVID exposed us and it broke a lot of people's brains. Yeah. And I think you can arguably, I'm not a mental health expert or clinician, but I think there's a argument that it's a mental health crisis also.
Yeah.
But these kids, some of these kids are different. And so to that, I think the most appropriate approach, and I heard another man characterize this, he described it as like when the Titanic sank, he was like, you know, there were some people in denial that the boat wasn't sinking. So who do you deal with? You deal with the people who are willing to get in a lifeboat.
Right.
And so with these kids, it's like we'll talk to and try to give support to the kids who will listen, who will be respectful. We'll put them in a lifeboat. And maybe when we come back with the second round of lifeboats, maybe these other kids will warm up to the idea of being receptive to the idea that something you're doing in your life is incredibly wrong. But I know it's a tough challenge and it's a big chore, because when you've been socialized to be a criminal or just be or if you've been socialized, if you live in a house with a bunch of criminals or people who don't think the right way, it's hard to strip that out of them.
Yeah, because that's all you know.
That's all. Yeah, it's all you know. So I'm not saying it's easy, and I think it's very hard, but perhaps
we let it go for too long. That's what it is. Somebody should have stepped in a long time ago. We just let a lot of stuff slide for far too long. We as a people, we as a community, we should have stepped up. You know what I mean? It seemed like, you know, once people start, it's funny because you start making money and then you move out the hood, right? Then you don't want to turn back. You don't never want to go back. Or you might ride by to show your kid, like, look, I used to live in that house right there, but let's get out of here. We're going to go. You know what I mean? There's very few people that give back and that are active and that still want to, you know, like make that area where they grew up better. Very few.
Well,
and some
yeah,
don't have the means. Some don't have the means to do so.
And some of them are in my family. I try to be a source of, I mean, that's on the real. It's like, I have relatives, younger ones. It's like, look, I've lived a lot longer than you. I'm not trying to tell you that you're less than anything, but I'm trying to give you tools on how to be a man in this country. How like, oh, you just want money. Money is what you want from me. What you need from me is mentorship and support so you can navigate through this life easier. And it's like, even as recently as like a month ago, it's like, I got a family member who just wants money. And who did he get that from? His daddy. It's like, you don't want the tools and sharing some wisdom.
Vicious
and that's
cycle.
and it's part of being hard-headed, as my mother used to say. It's just being hard-headed. Just people just getting some bubbles, and it's hard to pull them out of that. And I think some of it's fear-based, some of it's just naive or naivete.
Yeah. Generational ignorance is what I like to call it.
I didn't want to say it, but yeah,
it
is, man.
Yeah.
It is ruthless. It's deadly.
Mm-hmm. And some people won't break that curse. They're trying not to as much as they can. I want to jump into your foundation.
Right.
Yeah. So I want you to touch on that foundation. Let them know what the INVIA Foundation is about.
Right. So in Latin, the words INVIA means on the path to. Right. So I want people to be on the path to healing, on the path to recovery, on the path to greater happiness. And when I finished the book, I was like, this ain't enough. Like, I got to do more. So I said, well, what can I do? And the thought came, it's like, well, I can leverage my experience of being a digital professional. I've worked in the studio system with delivering content all over the world, man, to Apple, iTunes, to Google, to other digital platforms and markets around the world. And so the thought was, it's like, I can build an app, a free app. So when somebody's in some kind of state of trauma or violent trauma, they can identify where they are and they can get the proper resources, whether that's mental counseling, whether that's legal services, whether that's shelter, if violence has somehow disrupted them. And the second part of that, the vision is to provide services and funds for people who may need assistance for a variety of reasons. So my foundation, quite frankly, is very young. Like, I'm in the process of really laying out and building the app, and I'm having meetings and discussions with people in the industry. So the app is probably about a year away, unless I'm just being really conservative from being fully constructed and up on the Apple and the Google market. But like that's my mission, man, is to have technological tools for people that are free, and to have funds and services for people like housing that will help them during those disruptive moments. And the reason, or the way empathy plays into this, is like, I know how disruptive violence could be. Like, I know how scary it was in our home when the police had to come take my daddy away because my mother got into it. Or if, some stuff was jumping off at school and I got so depressed that I'm taking tequila shots before I go to school at like 8 a.m. and not understanding why I was doing it. And it's like, it's a trip, man, because people look at me, they go, oh, and it's funny, when people know you, they use the common language, like especially white people that don't know me, they go, oh, hey, Imani, like you had a Cosby kind of like upbringing, did you? I'm like, well, which Cosby are you talking about? Are you talking about Martini Cosby, or are you like talking about the show? They like the show, like, oh, okay.
Martini Cosby.
Well, yeah, they see the V-neck sweaters or whatever, and they think like I had, like one colleague said, oh, I just thought that you guys got home after school and you had jazz music playing in the background and you just talked about your day. And then I started thinking about my parents fist fighting, or, my brother having an episode, or like stealing money from me or whatever. And so like, I know what that disruption looks like. It just really is unsettling. And so what my whole mission is to accommodate people and give them support and free tools, because everybody got a smartphone. I want to give people the tools to be on a path to experiencing a rich life in a world that has been terrorizing Black people and other people in general just for like just decades upon decades. So writing a book was not enough for me, man. Like I need to push forward with my foundation. And when it's safe, because we're still in the pandemic, I need to be in front of people and spreading the gospel of what the benefits are to identifying what kind of trauma you may have experienced and offer some suggestions on how you can get to a place of peace.
I know we got to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to know really quickly, how did your family receive your book? Because it sounds like you did like a little tell-all, you left some secrets out. So how did they take that?
Everybody doesn't know.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So some people know, some people are taken aback by it. Some people, I think my guess is they're going to be resentful of the things that I say. There's going to be a strong reaction to, but that don't help nobody. Like just keeping all these secrets, like I changed some events and I changed names, but that's part of our problem, man. It's like everybody got all these secrets and you don't talk about for decades. And you go to the graveyard not having resolved anything. Right. And it's like that doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve a white family, a Black family, or an Asian family if you have like the uncle who was like molesting kids and that's another part. Like nobody wants to talk about that.
And that goes on a lot in a lot of different homes.
Yeah, a lot of different
homes. It goes on a lot.
Yeah. So it's in a mix of pleasantly positive. And I think some people, when they really learn, they ain't gonna like it. But I'm willing to accept that.
But when that movie option's on the table, yeah, then you'll have family coming to you like, hey, bro,
they're gonna love you.
Hey,
I don't care what you said about me.
Yeah.
Say some more if you want. We can make some stuff up together as long as it's just rolling.
Right.
So, yeah, before we let you go, man, listen, your podcast, Misconnected. I know we talked about this earlier and all, what spawned you to come up with that?
Oh man. Well, I was living in Spain and this is right after the presidential election. And my thought was like looking at the way media covers America versus the way America covers America is very different. Like it's less sensationalized. It's more honest. And my thought was these people aren't connecting the dots. They're not connecting the dots. And that there came a moment where I said, I want to, when I get more time, I want to do one of the things I'm pretty good at and that I love best. And that's socially breaking down, like analyzing what is happening, breaking it down, and then giving a commentary or a hot take on it. And as soon as I get like an hour this week, I'm going to break down this Will Smith and Chris Rock thing because
I always want to talk to you about that because I read your article.
Oh, you read it?
Of course I read it. Of course I read it.
This is my guy right here.
Of course I read it. We research on this show, brother.
Love it.
So yeah, I read it. I was going to get your thoughts on that, but go ahead since you there already. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, I wish I could have more time to do more episodes, but yeah, it's like, I want to help people. I want to simplify the complex and then lay it out for people. But my whole thing with the Chris Rock and Will Smith thing is it was a punk move.
Absolutely.
It was a punk move because if Idris Elba or The Rock or The Game or 50 is, yeah, if they make that joke, Will Smith ain't getting out of his seat. And it's like, it's like, I this is in the book also. I have felt that pressure of a dominating woman that forced me to violence. Cause my mother at a parent teacher conference, it's in the book, but the long and short of it, a kid punched me and my mother looked at me like, you better get him. And I felt horrible about it. I felt bad. So with the whole Will Smith thing, I feel like dude has a lot of things to work out. And I don't think Will Smith is a bad guy. I think he succumbed to a lot of pressure. I think he succumbed to a lot of maybe some realistic expectations. And he basically took an opportunity to bully a guy half his size. Right. And part of my mission is more about that moment. But it's like you assaulted a guy in front of an auditorium of a gang of people. And it's like Chris Rock has 2 daughters. What the is he supposed to talk to his daughters about? After you assaulted him over a joke. Right? And it's like, and your kids is talking like, oh, that's how we do it. That's not how you're supposed to do it. You don't put your hands on another man because I tell you what, there's a lot of people in graveyards and hospitals and morgues who had that same line of thinking and that got them in trouble. And it just infuriates me that he bullied a guy half his size because he didn't to do that.
No, and I think a lot of it had to do with his wife, and that's the problem.
And that's another thing. And it's like if your job as a woman or a mate, you're supposed to stop your guy when he's going to do something foolish. If you really, if that's love, you stop him.
She egged him on because she made a face. He was laughing. If you watch the clip, he was laughing.
He's laughing at first.
Yeah, and then she rolled her eyes. And I said this on our show, what was it, last week? I said, it looked like she beating him at home because he jumped right up. You know what I mean? She putting a pause on him. And then she laughed as he was walking back. She thought it was funny. I don't know. I that's why I thought it was a skit, but it wasn't until that awkward silence came that you knew, like, okay, they for real. You know what I mean? And then he's yelling from his seat, cussing at the dude. And again, the audience are full of people. And it's like, what 52-year-old man does that who's not on the street? And I'm not saying dude needs to be canceled because I'm not one for that. But dude needs some serious work, some emotional work. And I know there's a lot of pressures of being an entertainer. Some people, like I've known people who die over some woman. Like we can go to any prison. We go to Rikers. We can go to Wayside or Soledad out here. We can go in there and say, raise your hand if you in here over a woman or a guy. And it's going to be a large percentage. It's a large percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like, if you man enough to assault a guy in public, you got to be man enough to publicly apologize to that man if he will accept your apology. And I think that's the thing to do.
The speech, how narcissistic was that speech? Oh my goodness, I was so
You a vessel for love? You a vessel for love?
I honestly think that the Williams sisters should have checked them too, because you don't invoke their father's name in your foolishness.
Yes. And check this out, man. That's why I'm just really trying to help people see the constellation. It's like, imagine if he hadn't done that. Questlove has a shining moment and gets his Oscar. The Williams sisters can bask in their legacy and their father being celebrated. Right. And you, as a black man, Will Smith, there will never be a fifth black man to get an Oscar for a best leading actor. That moment is gone.
And let's not forget, all black production cast, first time.
Will Packard. And he had a good line about that. He said when that happened, it felt like somebody poured concrete in the room. I was like, ooh. That's a cold line, but it's a cautionary tale. And it's like, if I had to talk to him, if I was able to talk to him, like, dude, imagine if you hadn't done that. Imagine how that night would have gone.
Right.
So it's just like, the people, it's like, you got to think, you got to fight your impulses. You know, you have to develop the tools to get around that, because I was that guy in my 20s. Like I wanted to take off on a dude because he said some crazy to the girl I was dating at the time. Nothing jumped off, but she tried to stop me, to her credit. But it's like, we got to fight our impulses, and we can't glorify violence, man. Like what's happening in Ukraine, that's necessary violence and defending yourself from invaders. But this whole thing of just being casual and fetishizing violence.
Not to mention just to see two, black men going at it in a room.
Because you know what they're going to say.
Yeah. And like say, this would be socially acceptable if it was the BET Awards or
the Source Awards.
Yeah. But when it's the Oscars, it's like national news. You know what I mean? So
it's international.
International, actually, because overseas they had it first. You know what I mean?
And they didn't have it censored, because that's the way I found out. Like a friend of mine sent me a video. He's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Is this a bit?" And I'm like, it was the Australian coverage of it. And it's like, look, man, as specifically with black people, we don't have that margin of error to keep like this and demand equity and opportunity. And in parallel, being irresponsible and reckless. Like, that's not helping our cause. And yes, I know things happen, but we don't have that margin of error. And I was embarrassed by that.
Me too. I was too.
Most definitely. All right, so we're going to get ready to close out, right? Before we go completely off, I want you to please, Imani, tell everybody where they can reach you at.
Yeah, so you can hit me on social media. Just I forget the handle, but go on Twitter or Instagram, enter There Was Violence. Those are the official social media accounts for the book. You can go to my official website, www.therewasviolence.com, to get all the information and contacts. If you want to buy the book and get linked to the different websites like Amazon and Apple and Google, you can do it there. If you want to hear my hot takes, look up the Misconnected Podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. You can hit me there. I have a social media account for Misconnected Podcast also, so you can search for that. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it, man. Let me just say, man, this is the best conversation I've had.
Wow. We got to hit the yes on that
one. Yeah. This feels like home.
We enjoyed you.
Yeah, that's how we do it, man. All right. And the Only One Mic podcast is available on all major platforms that you stream your podcasts on. Please don't forget to rate the show and subscribe. Smash up them likes. Also, if you'd like to get in contact with the Only One Mic, you can reach us via Instagram and Twitter at the Only One Mic P1, Facebook and LinkedIn at the Only One Mic Podcast, and email at the Only One Mic 00@gmail.com. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant, because they too have their story to tell. Imani, also say this before I go. I never had to run from the Ku Klux Klan, and I shouldn't have to run from a black man. Peace.
Well said. Thank you, guys.
All right.